Hi class. So I had asked you to take a look at this document that one of the lecturers here at UTRGV created. And he's got a list of 8 tips to follow to make sure that you're integrating your quotations and paraphrases in the right way. A couple of things that I want to mention before we get started is that first, he mentions it down here, but I want to make sure it's really clear to everyone that you should be paraphrasing, but even when you paraphrase, you still need to cite it. Okay, so all the rest of his tips here are about using direct quotes. So that is when you are using somebody else's words word for word. You're not changing anything unless you're following the rules that he's using there with brackets or ellipses. So you're doing things word for word. You're not making any other changes. If you're putting things in your own words, you're paraphrasing, and that needs still to be cited, because otherwise it will sound like it's your own idea, and it's not, like you're getting it from someplace else, right? So he says here, a good writer knows how and when to mix paraphrasing and quotes. I would say usually my suggestion for mixing quotes and paraphrases is that when you feel like changing the words at all would cause you to lose the power of the statement, then you should definitely use a direct quote. If it's something that you can paraphrase it and it still is just as powerful, then you should paraphrase it. There should be a mix. What you want to avoid is a long list of quotations. So, quotation, citation, quotation, citation, quotation, citation. That's not any good, right? So that's going to look like you didn't do any writing at all. So we want to make sure that you're mixing it up with the paraphrases and the direct quotations. But no matter which one you're using, you always have to cite. Second thing, Mr. Flores here, he's used the MLA citation style. Again, unless you are an English major, or Spanish or another foreign language major, you're probably not going to be using MLA ever again. So I want you to already go ahead and use the citation style that you found out about for your major, right? That I had you do that as part of your annotated bibliography assignment. I need you to go ahead and go back to that website that you copy pasted into your annotated bibliography about for the citation style guide. Go back to that website, figure out how they're supposed to do in-text citation. Probably it doesn't look quite like this, right? It's probably going to be a little bit different. So you make sure that you're following not MLA format unless you're an English major or a foreign language major. Make sure you're following the format that you use for your degree. So anyway, what I want to do is kind of go through these. I'm not going to read all of them because he's done a great job, I think, of creating this tool. And I think that it's pretty self-explanatory, but I do want to show you kind of what I'm going to be asking you to do this week. So we're going to practice with the quotes that I've put here on my integrating sources map. So we already talked about how when you created this map that you could do direct quotes or you could do paraphrases. And either way really is fine. Again, we remember that this particular map is pretty bare bones. Like I haven't put a whole lot on there. Yours will be a lot more in depth, most likely. And also, even though you may have done a paraphrase on the map, you should still go back and look in that source to see if there is maybe a direct quote that you could use instead. Again, just keeping things, mix it up a little bit here and there. But just for purpose of the demonstration, I'm going to practice with the quotes that I have here. All right, so it says here to avoid a standalone quote in your essay. So avoid putting a period here and then starting the quotation and having the whole sentence by itself, right? So we don't want to do that. So what we do want to do is try to insert it within the sentence. He doesn't really like these introductory phrases like according to Flores, comma, this is actually a correct way to quote. Those don't bother me too much. I don't really think that they're that amateurish, but I do agree that the example in number 3, where you're mixing in the sentence, part of the sentence in right with your sentence, sounds a lot better, right? It's not really that much different because the introductory phrase, the idea here, is not like wild and crazy new creative thoughts on your part, right? So it's not really that much different from saying something like according to Flotus. So either way here is fine with me, but if we can try to do this a little bit more where it's kind of squished a little bit more into your existing sentence, then that would be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new Word document. Oops. Okay, and so we want to try to fit it right in the middle of the sentence, right? So I'm going to go back over to here. So I've got this quote. I'm just going to copy paste it for now. This is from Leanne's song, so I'm going to copy it, and then let's go back over here to my new blank Word document. So this sentence is about some participants indicated. So I could change that a little bit and say something like students interviewed in the study revealed that, quote, and we'll put paste here, oops, and then we're just going to take this part. Revealed that they tend to think more deeply about the subject areas when responding in writing as compared to giving verbal responses. Probably, if I'm already talking about the study, I probably would have mentioned it ahead of time, so something like Leanne Song, we probably wouldn't even say her first name, we would just say Song et al. In their, I don't know what year that was. I would probably look at the year. Let's see if I've got it. (2004). So in their 2004 study online, improving online learning, made some interesting conclusions, or made some interesting, instead of made, let's say found some interesting, this isn't a great sentence, but we can fix it later. Found some interesting results when interviewing students who, or when speaking with, or when entry results from students, former online students. And then I would probably change this to these, so it's a pointing word that points back to the ones that I just talked about. So these students interviewed in the study revealed that they tend to think more deeply about the subject areas when responding in writing as compared to giving verbal responses. Okay, so you can see here how I don't need to put her last name here because I already mentioned it here, right? This first part here isn't absolutely necessary, but if you're going to be talking about a study that they did, you kind of have to talk about who did it and what the study was. Did you know how to do that? Like if I were to do let's see, we can get back over to the right page. If I were to be talking about the Barron article, right, then I might not have to say that exactly because she didn't do a study. She's in this article, she's just reporting her findings and her thoughts. Okay, now, big thing that I want to emphasize to you. Let's see, which number is it? There it is. Now he kind of just tacks this on to number 5, but to me, this is super, super important. Okay, and I'm going to say it to you many times. Anytime that you give a quote, you need to talk about it. Okay, because otherwise, again, you're going to end up with this long list of quote to quote to quote to quote. And it is not your job just to report and spit out what these other people have said. It is your job to synthesize them and put them together. So that means after you quote somebody, you're going to need to talk about it for at least a sentence or at least a phrase. You know, something needs to be said afterwards. So you could say here, so they tend to think more deeply about the subject areas when responding in writing as compared to giving verbal responses. This somewhat surprising result may be let's see, I want to say something about how it might be as an effect of the technology that was used, might be an effect not only of the act of writing, but also the technology that was used. Okay, now I'm commenting on the previous sentence, but I'm also trying to make a bridge to the other source that I want to talk about. So the other source that I want to talk about is this one that I connected it to. Whoops. This one that I connected it to over here. New technologies encourage creativity, right? So because that's where I found that connection, right? So then I could say something like, Indeed. I really like Indeed. It's a great transitional phrase. Remind me, I need to maybe post some transitional phrases for you guys that are useful. So I can say, Indeed, it is widely understood that, and then I think the quote is, new technologies encourage creativity. New technologies encourage creativity. Quote, and then I would put Barron, page 43. Again, I'm using MLA citation, but you would use whatever citation that you need to use. Okay, so right here, I've already used two quotes, right? I've integrated them smoothly into the sentence. I've cited them. I put the two of them, I connected the two of them together with a transitional sentence, right? So don't just think about phrases, but transitional sentences to show, because it's going to, especially if the ideas are really different, it's going to take a little bit more work than just a phrase to show how they're connected, right? And then I used another transitional phrase to shift into my next citation, my next direct quote. And again, I embedded it right into the sentence, and then I cited it at the end. Okay, so let's go back to the tips that Mr. Flores has created for us. Okay, so another couple of things that I want to point out to you is this idea of using a block text. So the key is that if it's more than 3 lines of text, and you're not going to again use a block quote for something that you can easily to put into your own words and paraphrase. You're only going to use block quotes if everything is so specific, it's just done so well that if you change it at all, it's going to lose its power. Then you can go ahead and do a block quote. But I don't recommend doing a whole bunch of those, because then your paper just looks like big chunks of block quotes everywhere. So a block quote is usually you increase the margins, right? You make the margins bigger on the sides, and a lot of times they'll take also the line spacing. Usually if we're doing double spacing for a block quote, they'll make it single space so that it doesn't take up so much space on your page. And then you do the citation at the end. And then of course, again, whenever you finish with a citation or a direct quote or a paraphrase, you need to talk to it. So talk to your audience about it. So what? Why are you bothering to include this? What do you want us to be thinking about after reading that quote or that paraphrase? What's your point? Why are you including it? How is it related to your research question? Right? So I could even go back here, and my research question is, how do online learning interfaces affect student writing? So we could say here, this could be an interesting example of how the online interface could positively affect not only student writing, but also student critical thinking. Okay, now I'm trying to keep my words a little bit, I don't want to make it sound like this is absolutely 100% true. I'm kind of making it sound like a claim, like a kind of I don't want to say a weak claim, but I'm making a conjecture, or I'm trying to draw conclusions. I'm not saying this is what this means, right? So that's why I said it could be an interesting example, right? So I'm trying to kind of hedge my bets a little bit, that this is what I think, but I'm just kind of putting this idea out there. So I'm relating my quote back to my my research question, because otherwise, why are we even bothering, right? Why are we bothering to do all of this research? Why are we bothering to do these citations? Okay, and I also want to mention that if you need to change something so that it doesn't sound funny in your text, if you need to change a present tense verb to a past tense verb, or you need to change the pronoun I to he or we or they or whatever, as long as it doesn't change the meaning, if you put it in brackets, we'll understand. Usually if you put it in brackets, we can tell, oh, he probably just changed the pronoun, right? If the pronoun is what's in brackets, well, okay, well, that's not a big deal, right? Or, oh, they just changed the verb tense, and that's not a big deal. Okay, so we use this when you're quoting something, if it sounds awkward because of maybe one or two words that aren't agreeing with one another, like for subject-verb agreement, for instance. Then we can put those in there. So, for example, if the quote was, let me just say, let's just pretend, the quote was, they tend to, okay, so the quote is they tend to, but I wanted to say, a student, I wouldn't say tend to, because that's going to sound, the subject and verb are not agreeing there, so I could put the bracket and put the S, tends to, blah, 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 whatever else I know is what I needed to say, tends to think more deeply, or whatever it is that the rest of the quote. So you use those brackets to fix like grammatical stuff that isn't changing the meaning of the sentence, but if you don't change it, it's going to sound incorrect somehow, because you don't want to distract your reader with those kinds of superficial grammatical red flags, right? And then the same thing here, if the sentence is really long and you don't really want to do a block quote because there's a lot of stuff that's good, but there's a lot of stuff that's like, meh, I don't really need all of it, then you can use the ellipsis to cut some stuff out, right? So for example, if let's just say I wanted to quote this sentence. I'm just choosing this one at random. Right, so I would put it in quotation marks here. And then maybe I don't really want this part here. Then I could put that ellipsis to show that I got rid of a sentence in the middle, and now I've got a new sentence that starts with a lowercase t. Well, that's no good, so I'm going to put a bracket, I'm going to put a capital T, and then I'm going to put a bracket again, so you can see that I changed it from a lowercase t to an uppercase T, right? And then I would put my quote here, and I would put my page number here. Okay? So you can see I did both of those things there. I didn't want, like this, I thought that this sentence that I chose here was really important, but I didn't want all of it, so I cut out the part I didn't want and I replaced it with an ellipsis so that the reader can tell I took something out. And then after I took it out, this sentence didn't make sense because it looked like it was, because it was lowercase, so I changed it to an uppercase T and put a brackets around it, and it solved my problem. Okay? So this stuff here, like with the brackets and the ellipses, these are just tools that you could get used to after a while. What I'm mostly concerned about is that you are integrating your quote right into the sentence, and that, again, so important that you are always commenting, responding to the quotes. Explain how they are related to one another and how it's relating to your research question, right? And especially when we're thinking about these relationships. You can't just quote this and then quote this and assume that your reader is going to understand how they are connected. You can't do that. That's your job. That's not the reader's job. That is your job as the writer to explain how these two things are connected. It might be obvious to you because you've been thinking about it for a while, but it's not going to be that obvious to your reader. And even if it is obvious to your reader, they're going to be like, what a lazy author. Why didn't they try to explain to me, what they were thinking here, right? So for the good of your argument and for the good of your ethos, like the way that your audience is perceiving you as a writer, You need to make sure that when you are citing, when you are using direct quotations or paraphrases, that you are always commenting on them afterwards, doing that work to show how these ideas are fitting together. So when you're putting your quotes together, I can't really tell you do this, not that, but in general, you might not necessarily be doing all the song, all the quotes from this author, and then all the quotes from this author, and then all the quotes from this author, and then all the quotes from this author. That's not really the way a conversation works, right? You don't just take turns, unless it's like a group sharing kind of thing, right? A conversation is this person talks and this person responds and this person responds back, right? So just as I showed you in this brief example here, where where Song was talking back to Baron, right? And I might flip back to Song later on. It's the same idea throughout when you're using all of your sources, that you're talking about this idea that's linked, and so you're going to have these two sources kind of talking back and forth together, and then you're going to see, okay, so where do I need to go from here? What's the best idea to transition to next? So maybe you transition to these two and going back and forth, and then including this one in the conversation, right? So again, it's not like source 1 gets a paragraph, source 2 gets a paragraph, source 3 gets a paragraph, because that's not a conversation. That's, again, just reporting. Try to see if where those connections are and have those sources talk to each other, and then use these tips that Mr. Flores has given us to help these to integrate your quotes. If you have any questions about this, I definitely want you to ask me, and I will be giving you as much feedback as I can. Thanks for your attention.